Hey guys, it's Nick. Welcome to another episode of T-365. When our users need to go on vacation or travel across countries for business, we need to have an elegant solution in place to not only maintain a certain level of security with our operations and how we're creating exclusions for them, but additionally, we want to create a frictionless experience for the user, given that we are locking down, in most cases, outside country login in Microsoft. So in this video, I'm going to show you an automation that I created between Microsoft Forms and Power Automate that you can actually use as a template that a user can fill out, and we can automate the process of adding them to a temporary group that will have that approved country that they're going to travel to for the period of time that they're traveling, and then it'll remove them after they've returned automatically as well too. So not only decrease your operations, but also increase your security with some holes that can get poked in your policies that I see frequently in environments when we have these types of activities occur. So if you don't know me, my name's Nick. I'm a Microsoft MVP. I've been creating content here on the channel for the better half of a decade. If you haven't already, definitely like and subscribe to the channel to see more content around Microsoft and the MSP space. Otherwise, let's go ahead and dive in. Okay, so getting into it here, just a quick reminder that I do supplement these videos with blog posts. It's going to have all the steps we're going to cover. We're going to go through multiple phases here of what you need to do. But I just like to reference here, you don't need to be taking notes the whole video. You can actually pay attention and reference this as kind of a knowledge-based article after the fact for all the steps that we're about to go through. So here in the Entra portal, just to call out, this tenant does have P2 licensing, but the license that you need, I'm just using a business premium based tenant, and that has sufficient rights for the conditional access policies we're going to create, as well as a Power Automate license for the things we're going to be doing, as well as Microsoft Forms. So just call out some of the prerequisites there. Most of us, though, within conditional access have set up, a trusted name location for our country. And in mine, we're in the US, so I've just set this up as a trusted named location. And I'm doing this so that we can apply this to a geo-blocking policy within conditional access here. Many of you have set this up, but if you haven't already, it's okay. You can go ahead and set this up as well too. Definitely recommend it to block send outside the country origin that your users are mostly located. Doesn't necessarily have to be you. But effectively here, you're including all users, you're excluding a break glass account. You're just saying that the country, that you're excluding in this particular case is going to be the US, and we're going to block everything else. So this is a really powerful security tactic in case you do have business email compromise or user compromise, where somebody gets hosed and then they can't sign in because they're signing in from an IP that's outside of the US, right? So it's a base level security protection that I put on all of my customers, but just wanted to call this out as something that you're going to modify, and I'll show you that here as we work through these steps. So just taking you through what we're going to create here, we're effectively creating a Microsoft form that the user will fill out as a travel request. You could host this on your website. You could host it on a support page that you might already have, or it could just be linked out in tickets if a user or a technician gets a ticket that says, hey, I'm going to be traveling, or they get blocked, right? And then they need to put in a travel request. So effectively what we're doing here with our Power Automate flow is we're saying, is this in our approved country list? So what we're going to show is setting up named location for some additional countries that you would say are your approved countries of travel. And I'm just excluding some of the riskier countries that I would consider riskier in that, but also just kind of whitelisting ones that are most common for vacation, things like that. And that might dictate or be dictated by the company. And this isn't always vacation, right? It could be business travel as well too. But effectively here, if it's not in our approved country list, we're just going to open a ticket in our PSA tool. So our technician can go address that as well too and decide whether or not it's going to be approved country and fulfill the request. Otherwise, if it is, we're going to have a delay for the automation to go ahead and perform certain actions when the travel start date occurs. So we're basically saying, just-in-time access into this other country, if you will. And we're going to be adding them to a temporary travel group that we're going to create, which I'm going to show you here in just a minute. And when we do that, this travel group is going to be subsequently applying to another conditional access policy that we are going to be enforcing that allows access from those countries as well too, if they're part of this group. So I'll show you all that. And the main thing here is when the users sign in, the temporary group's also going to be excluded from our main geo blocking policy. So it's not going to even apply to that sign-in for this user if they're part of this group. And then it's going to validate the country that they're coming from so that they can sign in successfully overseas. And so after we do, this perform action of creating them or adding them to a group, we're going to create a ticket in PSA that says we've done that successfully, or for any reason this API failed or action failed, we're going to create a ticket that just says we tried to do this, but it didn't work out. So we need to troubleshoot even further. And then we're going to wait till their return date for travel, and then we're going to remove them from the travel group. So effectively just giving just-in-time access to that approved country list and then removing them when they return. So let's go ahead now and walk through some of these steps here that you're going to use to kind of go ahead and set up this automation. First thing we're going to do here is go back into conditional access. We're going to go back to our name locations. I've already added one here called temporary travel. I'd recommend doing the same here. But effectively, this is where you're going to decide. You can certainly use the list of pre-approved countries that you're going to see in the Power Automate template out of the box. But again, depending on where you're coming from and where you see a lot of travel, again, vacation or business, this list might be completely different or have some additions. This is a list of about 39 or 40 countries that I've added that I would consider to be very high on the list in the sense of travel request. So as you can see, there's obviously a myriad of countries we could add here, but I'd like to do, again, a least permissive model here, and we can address if somebody needs to be added ad hoc. You obviously want to kind of balance the countries that you add from a security perspective with this whole automation breaking down and you having to kind of manually go in and interfere with what's going on as far as that use case goes. So after you're done here, you'll go ahead and just go ahead and save this really at the end of the day for this being temporary travel. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and create a group. Something again that I've already done here. And I just call it temporary travel. You could call it, again, whatever you like there as well. I just made it a security group. And we did not have any members to start off with, but I've tested and, I've had my member in here as far as Nick Ross goes. So you can go ahead and I'm going to remove that just for the sake of our demo we're going to do here in a few minutes. But you could make this an M365 group technically, but I just like to have it as a security group. It's assigned membership as well for the actual creation of it. While we're here though, you do want to grab this object ID. We're going to use it in the Power Automate flow as a reference point for the group that we're assigning to the user that's asking for the travel request and subsequent removal. So make sure you just copy that and put it somewhere on like in a notepad for now, because we're going to use it as we go through the Power Automate template. Next here, you're going to create your form. You can just click on new form here, but I'm going to go into the one that I've already created for the sake of time. Very easy to create a form, and I didn't add too many questions on this just because we can grab even the responder's email with some settings that I'll show here in a second. But all I want to do is capture their full name so I can have some additional branding in the email messages that I send, updating the user on their request. We have our drop down here, which is just a choice object, and it contains all of the countries that are in our named location. You can use the 3 ellipses here to make this a drop down that we're going to see. Subsequently, I do like to add the other option just in case their country list is not seen here so that they can type that in and we can have a workflow to review that country. The other 2 questions are really straightforward: travel start date and travel return date. That's going to be part of our automation. And you could brand this obviously if you wanted to. I just did this for basic POC purposes, but when you click on collect responses, the only other thing that I like to do just for security is make sure that only people within the organization can respond so that it's not just a free form that anybody could fill out. And technically it would still break down given how I created the Power Automate flow. But I'd like to do it this way just so it's an authenticated form, and we're going to record their name as part of that. This is the link that you can copy and shorten the URL for your outwardly facing documentation, things that you can give the user in a support ticket, things like that as well, to submit a travel request. As you might have already surmised as well here too, this is going to be a per tenant form that you do create. and subsequent Power Automate flow. So you will have to set it up in all of your customers, but I think it's worth it given the security and the automation that you're getting with this, and you'll see that more so when you see the Power Automate flow. So within my blog, I've got a place where you can download this zip file that includes the template that we're going to upload into Power Automate. I'm just going to click on this to go ahead and open up that in a new window. One thing I will say is you do want to have a service account user most cases for this versus just a global admin that you're setting on these, or some user that's tied to the organization that could leave because they'll break the automation when they leave. So just take that in mind. But you'll go into My Flows here and you'll click on Import, and you're going to import the package here, and you're simply going to select the zip file that you've downloaded from the resource that I have on my blog. Once you do that, you're going to see this page here. You're going to leave this import step as create as new, and then you're going to change all of these here to a connection that you have within the tenant. If you do not already have a connection to Forms, to Entra, to Outlook, this is something that you will go ahead and click on Create New, and this will open up a new page for creating those connections. Again, this is where you do need to have some type of an administrator role to be able to connect to the Entra rights. And subsequently, you would need a mailbox user for the Office 365 Exchange permission as well too for this. But when you search for these, I already have the Entra role, but you'll click on New Connection. Entra might be at the top here, but a little pro tip is to use the search because there's quite a lot of connections in here. But you would just go in and subsequently select these and click on Create to establish a connection there. And after you're done, they'll be listed in the connections page. And after you're done there, you can go back to your subsequent tab we were just on, and then you would select that user and click on Refresh if you're not seeing it there. So click on that and click on Save, and then when you're done adding all three of these, you can just click on Import. Because I already have this environment, I'm not going to walk all the way through that, but that's all you're going to have to do there to get to the next page, which will say Open Flow. On this page, if you're not directly taken to it, you can click on Edit at the top. From here, we have a couple of different things to modify, one of which is that you're going to rip out this test here, and you're going to select the travel request form that we just created in previous steps. Next here, you're going to click on Response Details, and in the Form ID, you're going to clear out whatever's there. And again, subsequently, you're going to change this to Travel Request Form. You're going to leave in the Response ID because that's what we want to get here. And that's going to be coming from our trigger. Next couple ones here for the Get User, we're going to leave this at the responder's email because that's exactly what we're going to get. I mentioned that earlier with the authentication that's going on within that action. Send user email. This is going to send this to the user directly here. So you don't need to change anything like that. And if you wanted to modify this message that the user sees, you can. But I'm basically just saying, hey, thanks for your request. We're going to reach out if we have any issue with the country you submitted. And then we tell them that they're going to receive an approval email the day you start your travel. From there, we're initializing this variable, which is just an array, again, of all the named locations that we created. This is something you can modify. That you can use even ChatGPT to help you out with that. That's what I did to create this list really easily by exporting it out of Entra and having ChatGPT kind of pump that through. You can see what prompt I used in my blog post. And then from there, the only things you might need to look at is this delay until is looking at Mountain Standard Time. You might want to change that to your preferred time zone. And I have a link in my blog again with all the time zones, all the naming conventions that you would want to use so that you can plug that in. For the get group here, this is what I told you to copy whenever you created that security group. So you're just going to swap that out with your ID that you have for the temporary group within the environment. The environment here for the user ID, we're just getting from the get user call and the get ID call, so that doesn't need to be changed. And then in all of the create ticket flows here, you're going to change the to address to your email connector for your PSA tool. And subsequently, you would want to change this name to the customer name. You could take this out altogether if you really wanted to package up the template a little bit more agnostically, so you don't have to modify all this in every customer environment. But I like this just because it's really helpful to have that in the subject line of the ticket so that I can do further reporting in the future off of it. And subsequently, you'll do that again on all the create tickets because we have, well, if this API fails to add a user to the group, maybe because they're already in there for any reason, we want to create a ticket that says, this failed to process, but it's giving us all the information for the technician to respond and investigate. You have the send user confirmation, basically just saying, hey, your travel's been approved. You can now sign in from this country. And then we're going to wait again for the return date. This is again where you want to convert this time zone if you need to. And then it's going to remove the member from the group. And if it fails to do that, it's going to give a ticket for that as well too. So the technician can investigate if for any reason the API is down or it fails to process for any reason. We'll make sure we're diligent about that, given that the security issue that could bring up, right? Leaving them perpetually able to open themselves up to that country. And then on this side, we don't have that in our name location policy, right? Because if it doesn't find it in this array, then it's going to say, well, we're going to fail this and we're just going to create a ticket so the technician can investigate and see, is that a country we want to approve or not? If you're in a single tenant, you could create an approval workflow in Teams and just further the chain out here. Didn't have a really great way to do that from a multi-tenant perspective, MSP mindset. But in the future, I do think that we could create a secondary flow here so that if a technician does approve that, they could just pump that into a different flow. It would approve the country and then subsequently run through the remainder of the flow itself. I think that might be a great second iteration, right? Because otherwise, if this breaks down, then you're back to a manual process, but kind of what we're already doing today, right? So not a bad thing to have this work at least 90+% of the time. So now that we've done that, we just need to test that this form works. So we're going to click on collect responses here, and we're going to click on copy link. You could paste this in an incognito window and sign in, or just in a new window. Back in Power Automate, before you do that, you're just going to click on save, obviously for your workflow. And then once that approves, you're going to be able to test this with a manual flow. So we'll click on test, we'll select manual, and we'll click on test again. This will wait for this response to come through from the form itself. So here in our travel form, I'm going to fill this out here. Say Nick Ross, and we're going to get a drop down of our countries here. I'm going to go ahead and say that I'm going to be coming from Italy or going to Italy. And for the process date, just for the sake of this example, I'm going to do today, so it'll run all the way through without any pausing, but I'll show both examples there. We'll have the return date on the 14th, and we'll click on submit. Back in our Power Automate flow, we can see this is running here, and it's gone through and passed the delay and gone through, and it's waiting now on the return date, which is that 14th date, which is exactly what it should have done. And it went through and processed the ticket in PSA, and also a user confirmation. So let's take a look at that, just so that we can see those emails that went out to the end user as well. Okay, so this is the first one, and realistically they're submitting these in advance, so they wouldn't have these back to back. But this is the one saying, thank you for submitting your travel request to Italy. We'll process the request and reach out if there's any issues with the country you submitted. Receive an approval email on the date you start your travel. So it looks good there. And then the other one here, we process your travel request and you approve to sign in from work from the 10th to the 14th in Italy. If you need to create an extension, please resubmit the travel request form. Back in Entra, if we go look at our members, we have me added here as well too. So this is a great way to automate that. And we've tested that successfully. Now you could wait for the return date to make sure that that's functioning as appropriate as well too. Maybe just do it in a day in between for your testing. But the last thing obviously we need to do is fulfill the conditional access policy that is going to be fulfilling this. But first, if we go into our block access policy, you're going to go into the exclusions here and you're going to add the temporary travel group that we created, just so that it doesn't prevent them from signing in, because you're doing this block across all those countries except for the US. And then within the conditional access policies, we're going to go into, you can create a new one, and I just labeled this temporary travel exclusion. You can call it whatever you like here. For specific users, we're including temporary travel group. We're going to include all cloud apps for this. We're going to include the network, which will subsequently add this condition, which is that we're selecting the temporary travel network, which is the name location we created at the beginning of the video. It has a list of our approved countries. And then we're still obviously going to require multi-factor authentication, more so heightened, that you have that when they're traveling as well, obviously too, for every sign-in that they're performing. So that's it. Now we're just going to wait for the return date, and in the flow request here, if you're not as familiar with Flow or Power Automate, you'll see that this is going to run until it's done, and then you'll see ones that I've been testing here that either failed for various reasons. The biggest reason of failure that came up from these was just that the user was already in that group, and we tried to re-add them, which created an API failure, or I had a bad connection. So nothing crazy, and you shouldn't run into that given that you have the template, and in production you're not going to be necessarily having that user within that group already, or they shouldn't be, but that's just why I created that failure flow to go ahead and create a ticket in PSA as well too. So I hope this was helpful, and I hope you can use this to improve your security as well as the end user experience for travel requests. Definitely comment below with anything that you have for me on this flow and what you're doing today to secure sign-ins when users are on the go. Thanks guys, I'll see you next week.